Let's be extra nerdy today and talk about in-depth strategy for StarCraft 2, and more specifically, we're gonna be talking about the Protoss versus Terran matchup. As you may be aware, I've personally been struggling quite a little bit in this matchup, but with me, pretty much every single player out there that is, playing at a higher level, I suppose. In the professional scene in particular, the Protoss versus Terran matchup has been quite heavily in favor of Terran, in particular since patch 3.8, just a couple of months ago. However, strategies have been evolving, and slowly but surely, Protoss has started figuring out what kind of strategies they need to go for if they want to go ahead and counter the Terran player. And today I want to have a look at ShoWTimE's Protoss versus Terran, where he focuses on a very aggressive one-base play. He goes for basically an Oracle proxy. He builds a Stargate on the other side of the map and proxies with that, but he follows it up with macro. We're going to have a look at two games that are very, very similar, and we're going to try and figure out exactly how he executes that strategy and how we can incorporate it into our own play as well. Now, these are definitely very solid games. He goes up against Alive right here, a very, very high-level Terran player as well. And I've been trying this out over the last few days myself, and it's been going really, really well. I was mostly doing like adept-based, like for example, like 6-gate adept into a 3rd base, or like 8-gate adept, or very, very quick robotics play. And it just seems to not work out very well. Mostly like the changes to, for example, like the Terran Siege Tank, and then also like the Liberator, Harass, and all the different kind of options that Terran has. They are very, very difficult for a Protoss player to control, I suppose. And in many instances, if you were like, basically let the Terran decide what the game is going to be like, you're gonna very quickly start falling behind. And the nice thing about this build right here is that you basically take matters in your own hand and you go from there. So here's what we got. We go for the pylon first, then we go for the gateway follow-up as well, and then a very, very quick double gas. Now, the double gas right here is absolutely crucial, because this lines up pretty much spot on, really. So we do have that very quick early probe out as well to go ahead and start scouting across the map. Of course, depending on the map that you're playing on, you're gonna have to change that one out. But rather than talk about super specific timings, I want to more or less give you like a general guideline to start executing this as well. So he goes for a pylon, then a gateway, and then 2 gases as soon as he possibly can, all the while producing as many probes as he possibly can. Next up, he goes for an immediate cybernetic score as well. But for those Protoss players out there that have been paying very close attention to this game, you may have already noticed that there is indeed no second pylon up right there just yet. And normally you build that pylon right around 19 supply or so, or actually it's going to be the right end right here. And the reason for that is because the second pylon already will be built to proxy that Stargate. Now, before you start talking about the fact that this is sort of like a cheesy strategy, right? Because it most definitely is a cheesy strategy. The nice thing is that you follow it up with 2 more Nexus really very quickly afterwards, which makes it so very, very powerful. And the nice thing is that on every single map in the current map pool, this is something you can execute. For example, on 2-player maps, I mean, you know exactly where your opponent is going to be spawning anyway. This right here is the biggest map, which is why I showed you this game in particular in the current map pool. But even on, like, for example, what's it called? The deserty map. I'm Cactus Valley Alley. I was forgetting the map right there for a second, the name of it. Even on that one, you can oftentimes like build the proxy in the middle of the map, because that is not really a point that players are going to be scouting very often, as early on they're mostly scooting around the map. Anyway, regardless, while we are going to go for some very quick Oracle play, the follow-up will be some very macro-focused strategies as well. And in many instances, in particular, if you are executing it well and you're controlling your units properly, you can basically close out the game right away. And I will show you in the second example match that I've got for you today how that can indeed work as well. Anyway, so we got that second pylon going up at the proxy location. So notice right here, he leaves the probe here as well, because this probe is meant to build that Stargate ASAP. And of course, this never really gets scouted right here by the very first scouting SCV either. So, because of the timing of the gases right here, right when the cybernetic score finishes up, ShoWTimE can afford 2 different things, right? So first off, he goes for the Mothership core. The Mothership core right here is absolutely crucial because it counters the Reaper play. If you do not have that Mothership core, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble. On top of that, he can also build the Stargate. Now, what does this mean? Basically, the one interesting aspect right here is that instead of rushing out the Warp Gate upgrade, which is most definitely like the most common upgrade for basically all of the Protoss build orders, ShoWTimE delays that one for a little while and favors that Mothership core here instead and goes for the much faster Stargate right there. He then also follows it up with an Adept. Now, in some instances, you can actually push with the Mothership core, and once again, I'm going to show you in that second match what I mean with that as well. But these two units right here are meant for defensive purposes, and at the very least, the Adept can do that absolutely brilliantly. Very shortly afterwards, he's gonna go for a Nexus follow-up here as well. So notice, he's not really building any additional probes here after setting up the full saturation, like the 16 probes on minerals, and a double extractors or assimilators right here as well. He's not building up any additional probes, but instead, just simply waits out the resources right now, and he puts up that Nexus. So while he is indeed moving out with that Mothership core, the SCV has indeed been found as well. It will be taken care of here very shortly, but he's basically just saving up gas here to get the Oracle out as early as possible. So once again, as far as gas spending goes, right? First thing he gets is the Mothership core. Second thing he gets is the Stargate. Those are pretty much exactly at the same time and should be down very, very early on into the game. The next thing he decides to get is going to be that single Adept that he built very early on. Then he gets the Warp Gate, and afterwards, once that Stargate finishes, you should be pretty much at a perfect amount of minerals and gas to go ahead and not only build that Nexus, but also follow it up with the Oracle. Now, of course, when you first try this out, right, you're not gonna be able to get it as perfect as ShoWTimE is executing it right here, and that's okay. The thing is, you need to practice this a couple of times before it is going to be working out as brilliantly as it is. But what ShoWTimE does pretty much every single time is make sure that he goes for 2 oracles and then he transitions once again. So if you speed up the process right here for just a little bit, because he does indeed go back into that pro production here for a little while, here's the follow-up as well very, very shortly after. Actually, is he already going to put it down? I thought I saw the glimpse of it just now, but it looks like he may very well be queuing up the second oracle here first. And indeed, that is going to be the case. So, of course, he's going to try and harass his opponent's workers with that. But you can see, as far as, like, the income really goes at this point, right? It's not that heavily in favor of the Terran right now. I mean, of course, he does have mules mining. But for the most part, Terran has gone for a very, very standard build here. For the most part, this Oracle should be able to get in there at a time that the Terran player is not going to have missile turrets out just yet and is not going to be able to defend it just yet either. So, he is indeed going to be able to start beaming away at some of these units. Of course, he does need to target fire down the Widow Mine, and if you fly into the Widow Mine, which is, you know, very, very difficult to avoid, I guess, you are indeed going to be losing that Oracle because it dies in a single hit. But the idea is that you keep this thing alive, and of course, I can't really teach you all too much when it comes to the micro aspect. That is just simply a matter of control and doing this over and over and over again. But the idea is that you harass as much as you can with the Oracles while keeping them alive, because even later on into this game, these dudes are going to be extremely helpful as well. So here's the transition right here for ShoWTimE, okay? All this time he's been on a single gateway, but instead, right when he's doing all of this harassment, he adds on more and more probes because that natural has indeed finished up. He goes for that Twilight Council and then the double gateways. So that is the transition right there. He goes for the double gateways and the Twilight Council. So while he's harassing right here, he's getting a bunch of damage in. I mean, he's managed to kill 8 workers right here in total, which is very, very significant. He's already got himself a very nice little lead. Now, we don't need to necessarily watch this entire game right here, because we're mostly here to check out exactly what kind of follow-up is going to be coming here, because he is indeed gonna get the blink upgrade right here for the Stalkers. So notice right here, right? Very early double gas, very, very early Stargate follow-up, very quick Nexus afterwards, and then he finally starts adding on unit-producing structures as well. Afterwards, right after starting up that blink, and this is crucial, you cannot forget about this, you really cannot forget about any of these things, by the way, but the robotics facility needs to be up right now. For the very reason why that is going to be the case is the fact that a Widow Mine drop can absolutely tear you apart. So you need that robotic facility early on so you can get the observers out as well as start transitioning towards higher tier units. So of course he does have revelation on these oracles as well to reveal any kind of potential aggression, which is a reason why you don't get it as early as you normally do. But he's really trying to keep these dudes alive and make them harass for as much as he possibly can. Then very shortly afterwards, and this is what makes this strategy so very interesting, he goes for a third Nexus right here as well. And actually, well, in this particular instance, of course, because I'm very closely paying attention to it, he doesn't quite add it on just yet. But you can see right here that he will very shortly afterwards be adding on that Nexus here on the low ground as well. he's actually still got more Stalkers here instead, for no apparent reason. In some other games that I've watched him play, he goes for the Nexus a little bit faster, but regardless, you get the idea. Is while he's basically moving across the map and being an absolute pain to his opponent, while he's tagging the opponent's armies right here with Revelation, he's sniping as many drones or as many SCVs as he possibly can, he's also establishing that very big economy. And then like the follow-up, I suppose, and really like the like eventual goal here for the Protoss player, while I speed up the game for just a little bit, is to follow this up as well with more and more gateways. And after establishing that third Nexus, he will be able to do exactly that. Add on the robotics bay and start producing Colossi as well. And really, this is where the game obviously transitions into a lot more like macro or like a lot more micro focused styles, right? He's still keeping those oracles alive to reveal the Terran's army. Basically, that will give him like the perfect vision of everywhere that the Terran units are indeed moving. But this allows the Protoss player to really establish into a very, very solid early to middle type of game, while really taking matters into their own hands. Like, the one thing that I've noticed is that this sort of like completely doesn't just force the Terran player to defend against your strategies and, you know, force them to not miss micro, because then they just straight up lose the game. But more importantly, it keeps the Terran players contained in their base and really prevents them from moving out in the earlier stages of the game. So while of course you now are basically in like the middle to late stages of the game, and it's very difficult to change you know, super specifics, and you can see like right now, for example, ShoWTimE decides to go for that very quick fourth base here as well. You can see that of course there is a lot of room for mid-game transitions right here that you prefer. I mean, in this instance, of course, he is indeed going for those Colossi. If you wanted to, you could go for Archon Zealot as well. You could go for Storm early on. You have all kinds of different options, but these are the units that ShoWTimE has been favoring right here. And let's try and jump into the second match here as well and see exactly what the differences are. Now, spoiler alert, he actually won't really be changing all too much about his build order at all. He's still trying to get as many probes out as he possibly can. However, he's making one major adjustment, and while he's still going for the Proxy Oracle, he's going to go for an aggressive move with the Mothership core as well. And that's personally the one thing that I've been doing pretty much exclusively myself as well, and it works like an absolute charm. In particular on a map like the one that we are on right here. So, of course, one of the most common Terran build orders, right, is to open up with the Reaper and then go for the expansion. That is basically what you see in very many instances right here for the Terran player. But on this map, you can actually make it so that the Reaper is not able to jump up into the main base at all. And that is the reason why ShoWTimE is, instead of just using this pylon to power his buildings, is using the pylon as part of the wall off. So ShoWTimE is trying to set up a full wall right here at the top of the ramp to prevent the Reaper from ever getting into the main base. And that really opens up all kinds of different options. But once again though, ShoWTimE goes for the pylon, he goes for the gateway, the double gases, and a very early probe to move out across the map. Now on this particular map, he decides to proxy right around here or so. I think it's right around here, or maybe a little bit more down, but regardless, it's basically behind the third base location, and he's going to be able to start up the pylon right there, right then. Of course, once again, he needs to make sure that he gets that cyber core down as early as he possibly can, so he is indeed going to be sending a probe early to put that thing down as soon as the gateway finishes. And right as that does, indeed, he is going to be following it up with a cybernetics core and then also a pylon very, very quickly. So notice, right, while the map is definitely different and the strategy may change just a little bit, you can see that the general outline right here is still the exact same. ShoWTimE is executing this to near perfection, not really making any mistakes in that regard whatsoever, and really that's what you're looking for as well. So if you are doing something similar along those lines, definitely make sure that you practice this a bunch in custom games. Don't just immediately jump onto the ladder, because you probably are just going to end up being more and more frustrated. But for me, so far, it's been working out like an absolute charm. So cybernetics core finishes, he goes indeed once again for that Mothership core, the Nexus at the, or rather the Stargate on the other side of the map. So notice once again, so far it's an exact copy of what he did previously. Now let's talk about this ramp for just a little bit, right? So the Reaper is indeed moving across the map right now. The Reaper cannot actually jump into the main base in any space right here. There's no area right here that he can wall in or jump up in. He cannot jump up right here, for example, and he can also not, well, he could technically start moving up right there and, you know, start hitting the pylon or whatever, but there's no way for it to start harassing the mineral line right here. Because of that, ShoWTimE can actually skip out the very first adept and go for a faster Nexus instead. So the only reason why this is going to be the case once again, right, is because of the map layout. On other maps, you most definitely are going to need, you know, that Oracle early on to get rid of any kind of Reaper play. But on this one, you can basically prevent the Reaper from doing anything and move across the map with the Mothership core. Now, indeed, he is going to be harassing here for a little while longer. You know, of course, that Reaper is going to be a bit of a pain. It does indeed hit itself, apparently, with that mine, somehow, some way. But here's what makes this so very interesting. So the Stargate follows up. He once again goes for that Oracle as soon as he realizes that it did indeed follow up. There we go. But here's the follow-up that you can also go for, and what works on many, many maps, and what really punishes weaker Terran players, and what I've personally been winning, like, a lot of games with. So even though he does establish that economy, in many instances, I'm sure that ShoWTimE will be able to pick up the victory here as well. He brings the Mothership core across the map, and he decides to build a pylon right outside of the Terran's base. And the idea behind that is that the Terran player, while he does have full vision of this, it will not have enough counters right here to properly deal with a photon overcharge from that Mothership core. So you gotta keep in mind, right? Of course, ShoWTimE right here is going for that very quick Oracle play. He's queuing up the second one here already. And the real counter to it is going to be, first off, the Widow Mine, which he just simply has to pay very close attention to. And secondly, the Marines. Any Marines that can be picked up right here with, for example, a photon overcharge can absolutely murder it. And on top of that, this also forces the Widow Mine to go to the front to prevent that Mothership core from entering the mineral line as well. And at that point, the Oracle is gonna go in and start doing crucial amounts of damage to all of these Terran units. Now, what do you think the follow-up is going to be? Well, it's going to be the exact same as we saw in the previous match. At the very least, if I understand correctly, he is going to go for something really similarly, but you can see he's doing a very significant amount of damage here. He's simply just going to try and start building up a ton of economy here, start getting probes for this expansion. He goes for the Twilight Council, and very shortly afterwards, 2 additional gateways as well. Now, in many instances, like I said, if you micro this well and your opponent is making one tiny miss micro, you will just end up winning the game right here. I mean, that Oracle is indeed going to be in some trouble here, but it gets a very significant amount of kills. And in total, 9 workers went down, a couple of depots had to pay for it with their lives. And while the Reaper eventually managed to somehow, some way get in, I guess he must have shot the grenade at the perfect angle or whatever, so somehow it managed to get in there. But regardless, you can see at this point, while the Reaper did indeed get into the main base here eventually, that the Protoss is very, very far ahead. Once again, adding on that Twilight Council, 2 more gateways, and as you may remember from the previous match, you will be able to start expanding very, very shortly here as well to that 3rd base location, and simply just hold on. So once again, right, the Oracles keep on moving across the map. Basically what he's trying to do is set up a revelation on as many of these Terran units as he possibly can, so he can keep track of exactly where all of those are going to be located. But once again, right, you can notice here that this really puts like matters into the Protoss' hand, rather than forcing the Terran player to be the one that decides exactly what is going to be happening in the earlier part of the game. And I think that is mostly the thing that I have been enjoying a lot. Once again, if you know, are going up against a Terran player that is not as good as Alive, and you know, probably every single person that's watching this game is not as good as Alive. Alive is absolutely incredible. You know, you will be able to just simply out-control them, and in many instances, just simply straight up win the game. Now, a couple of words of caution, I suppose. Widow Mines, one-shot oracles, right? Like I already briefly mentioned. And they can indeed be burrowed in all kinds of annoying locations. One thing you may need to do is twist around your screen sometimes, because one popular location, for example on a map like this, is to burrow the Widow Mine right there. And if you fly in with the Oracle, you can actually not see it. So be very, very careful. Watch out as a Protoss player for these little potholes, I suppose, in the ground. I can't actually show you it right now, but you see a little dimple in the ground that shows you exactly where the Widow Mine is located. Then I guess the only way you can properly learn where those are most commonly located is by simply losing your Oracle a bunch of times and, you know, going from there. Because ideally, you want to keep these dudes alive for as long as possible, because both the Revelation as well as the Stasis wards are absolutely awesome. So once again, ShoWTimE ended up killing his own pylon right there at the front. He managed to get that 3rd Nexus out very, very early. He's going for that robotics facility and the quick follow-up right here with the what are they called? The observers, so he can start scouting with those. And very shortly afterwards, now that Blink is about to finish up as well, he can indeed go for the play right now with the Blink Stalkers, and he can also start transitioning towards that robotics bay and eventually the Colossus as well. So notice, right, even though this is a very different game game, and the game played out very, very differently as well because of the more aggressive opener. The follow-up right here is the exact same, and Terran gets a very, very, like, tricky scenario because they just simply fall behind from the earlier stages of the game. Now, of course, if you are going for Blink opposed to, for example, the Adept upgrade, you're gonna indeed be in some trouble because you need to, like, make sure that you defend properly. But in basically all of the instances that I've seen ShoWTimE and other players execute very, like, common variations of this build as well, it is just working out like an absolute charm. And I mean, as long, like, once again, right, as long as you don't lose your first oracles and you manage to keep the Terran player contained, you can establish yourself a much greedier expansion and therefore transition into a macro game. And also in this match right here, Alive is going to be forced to GG out. Let me know if you got any questions whatsoever down below in the comment section of this video. I would love to try and help you out. Of course, like I said, I don't have like a super specific build order here available whatsoever. But if you are like 100% interested in that, definitely just go through the video and note them down yourself. That way you actually probably learn a lot more from it as well. I personally don't use super strict build orders myself until much, much later. I feel like you probably need to do at least like 20 attempts of this before starting to get into like the super detailed specifics, the super detailed specifics that, for example, ShoWTimE executes, because a lot of things you may not properly understand if you are indeed following a word-by-word build order. For example, right, that robotics bay or that robotics facility follow-up right here, that may not make a whole lot of sense if you haven't already died to, for example, a Widowmine follow-up from your opponent, right? And you wouldn't have been able to learn that, you know, you obviously may need to get an observer a little bit earlier on to the game. And then, you know, simply by going back to this video at a later time, or for example, checking out a live game from one of these players, once again, or any Protoss player out there, you can actually learn exactly the timings that they choose to go for, and then eventually get down to the point where you can indeed go into these super exact build orders. But I don't think it's worth judging like builds exactly by like 3 minutes and 5 seconds. I don't think, right, you know, that really means a whole lot. But anyways, if you got any questions, let me know down below. Also, if you enjoy these type of videos, I love making them. Let me know, because I love talking about this game and about StarCraft in general. So if you have any suggestions, or if you just simply enjoy these videos, let me know, because I would love to make more. But other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I hope to see you in the next one.